Chairman Westerman, we welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Burgess and Ranking Member McGovern. Appreciate this opportunity to appear before the committee today to testify in support of our bipartisan legislation, H.R. 8790, the Fix Our Forest Act. And Mr. Chairman, up until the ranking member's opening statement, I thought we had a bipartisan bill that we had worked on for a long time, but I guess we're in full campaign mode and we want to attack our forest while they're in a crisis. Even though our friends across the aisle might be in full campaign mode, our forests are in a crisis. And as we sit here today, more than 7.3 million acres have burned across the country this year. That's 1 million acres more than the 10-year average. At its current pace, we're on track for one of the worst wildfire years in our history. The Fix Our Forest Act isn't a partisan messaging bill, it's a solution to a real problem. After decades of mismanagement, our once healthy forests have turned to tinderboxes, simply waiting for someone to strike the match. These ticking time bombs are approaching the final few seconds on the clock, and it's time for Congress to act to protect the priceless resources that is our nation's forest. Devastating megafires were once a generational event, but now wildfire seasons are more commonly called wildfire years. This month, at least 234 structures have been destroyed by fires in Southern California, as more than 117,000 acres have been burned. This level of destruction, however, has become so routine that if you turn on the news, you likely won't even hear a word or see a clip. We've become numb to the apocalyptic levels of wildfires that we see year in and year out, and it's past time for change. As a forester, I've seen firsthand how these invaluable resources can flourish under proper management. A healthy forest allows wildlife to thrive, improves water and air quality, and provides abundant recreation opportunities. I've also seen time and again how treating and managing our forests can make all the difference in fighting and preventing catastrophic wildfires. Unfortunately, in our federal forest, we're just not implementing treatments in the correct scale and simply not completing enough of them. Take, for example, the Cameron Peak Fire, a 2020 wildfire in Representative Nagusa's district that became the largest wildfire in Colorado state history. When the fire reached the Shambhala Mountain Center, where previous forest thinning projects had been completed, firefighters felt safe enough to battle the blaze. Corey Carlson, a firefighter who was on the front lines of the Cameron Peak Fire, watched the fire balloon to more than 100,000 acres by the time it hit the mountain center. A local paper recounted what happened next. The front of the fire hit the restored forest. It slowed down. There was less fuel to burn. With the fuel treatment and the firefighters on the ground, we were able to pick the fire up there, Coley Carlson said. It was hugely successful. Looking back, Carlson wouldn't have even ordered his team to set up camp on Shambhala campus if there hadn't been restoration work done. This is not an isolated incident. The following year, the Bootleg Fire in Oregon burned over 400,000 acres and was so intense it created its own weather system and firenadoes. Those are conditions that's impossible for firefighters to battle. In a story reported by NPR, the fire's behavior changed when it hit the Sycan Marsh Preserve. According to the article, as a massive inferno half the size of Rhode Island roared into the Sycan Marsh Preserve, firefighters said the flames jumped less from treetop to treetop and instead returned to the ground where they were easier to fight, moved more slowly, and did less damage to the overall forest. And I will note that there had been active forest management taking place in the Sycan Marsh that allowed these firefighters to get in and stop the fire. The Oregon Forest Program Director for the Nature Conservancy further stated, what firefighters were reporting on the ground is that when the fire came into those areas that had been thinned, it had significantly less impact. We know what needs to be done. We're just not doing it because our agencies are getting stuck in the mud with endless environmental reviews and frivolous lawsuits. Fortunately, we have an answer. The bipartisan Fix Our Forest Act will allow us to revitalize our nation's forests and begin addressing the forest health crisis we've created. This bill will simplify and expedite environmental reviews for our most critical forest management projects by codifying existing emergency regulations, and expanding existing categorical exclusions under NEPA. These aren't new authorities. They're tools that both Republicans and Democratic administrations have utilized. We're just making these tools larger and more efficient so we can meet the scale of this crisis. This legislation encourages greater collaboration between our federal land managers, tribes, states, and local governments by codifying shared stewardship and fixing good neighbor authority. Fire knows no bounds, and neither should our forest management projects. Using state-of-the-art science, this bill will protect communities by streamlining existing community wildfire protection programs, identifying the communities at the highest risk of wildfire and prioritizing treatments there, and reducing wildfire risk in utility right-of-ways. Finally, the Fix Our Forest Act encourages technological innovations from wildfire prevention and detection to creating new markets for products like biochar. This legislation jumpstarts our ability to use technology to confront our wildfire crisis. Before I yield back, I would like to talk about the bipartisan process that this bill has been through to get before you today. In April, we first held a hearing in the Natural Resources Committee on a discussion draft. Then, following 2 months of gathering feedback from stakeholders across the political spectrum, Congressman Scott Peters and I introduced this bill in June of this year. At our markup of the bill, we accepted amendments from both Republican and Democrat members of the committee. Even after the bill was reported out of the committee on a voice vote, Representative Peters and I have worked closely with outside stakeholders to generate support for it from across the political spectrum. My point is that in every step of this process, we have engaged with anyone willing to work with us to improve this legislation. We have worked across the aisle to perfect this bill and ultimately make it a stronger product for the health of our forest and the benefit of our nation. Today, I'm proud to testify in support of this bipartisan common sense bill that mitigates catastrophic wildfires, revitalizes private markets, and gives communities essential tools to manage the resources they know best. Its enactment will result in healthier forests and in a healthier environment. This legislation should have been passed and put into practice many years ago, but we can't wait longer to do it if we want to keep our forests healthy and stop these devastating wildfires. Again, I want to thank my colleague, Congressman Peters, for his thoughtful work across the aisle on the legislation. I strongly urge the committee to report an appropriate rule to provide for the consideration of this legislation on the floor of the House. Again, today is our chance to fix our forest. Thank you, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chairman Westerman. There's not a Democratic witness today, so you've already addressed the bipartisan nature of this bill as it was reported out of committee. Was there anxiety? Was there a lot of consternation about what you were reporting?
Like I said, it passed on a voice vote. So if anybody had an opposition to the bill in the committee, they certainly didn't voice it then. Now, I consider a voice vote pretty much a unanimous vote.
I would too. We don't have unanimous votes up here, so that would be unusual. So
this is one bill you should have a unanimous vote on.
We should. Let me just ask you this too. You worked with the former Speaker McCarthy a great deal on the Save Our Sequoias Act. Is part of that incorporated into the bill that we have before us?
Yeah, a lot of the work we did on Save Our Sequoias, which again was a bipartisan bill, is included in the Fix Our Forest Act. We took input from a lot of different members on things that have worked. We've got a lot of outside support. It's really a good bill, and it's past time to get these kind of policies in effect.
Well, I agree with you. I'll recognize the ranking member for any questions he might have.
Well, thank you very much. You talked about the bipartisan process, and here, does that, I heard you say you were requesting an appropriate rule. What does that mean?
A rule that gets it to the floor
Well,
so we
do
can...
you want the bipartisan process to continue? I think last time I checked, over 40 amendments were filed on this bill. Would you be, are you asking that all 40 amendments, or I don't know, there may be more now, that everybody should be able to offer their amendments, or
Well, I think that's the job of the Rules
Well,
Committee
but
to
the reason why you
determine
come
which
to
amendments.
testify here is basically to help make a suggestion to us on what you, as the chair of the committee, or the ranking member, would like to see. And I'm just asking, do you want to, are you open to making these amendments in order, or would you want to close rule, or are there some amendments that give you more heartburn than other? I mean, it's your
Yeah,
committee
I think we've vetted this bill quite well. There could be some amendments that could be made in order, but I don't think your whole list of amendments should be made in order.
Did you give the committee a list of your recommendation of which amendments that you?
Yeah, we've worked with my staff's worked
the Rules
with the
Committee?
Rules Committee staff on that.
Yeah, and are they more Republican amendments than Democratic amendments, or is this?
We had several amendments that we were trying to get for the markup that we just couldn't get those, the details worked out on them, but I think, I know I've visited with Representative Peters. He's happy with the progress we've got on the bill, still supportive of it. And again, we'll take up whatever amendments that the Rules Committee makes in order, and we can debate those and vote on them on the floor.
We'll see how it turns out. I have a feeling it won't be. I think a lot of these amendments will probably not be made in order. But I want to ask unanimous consent to insert the statement of administration policy in the record on this bill. And
Without objection.
let me just read the last paragraph, and then I'll yield back. The administration appreciates the several provisions of H.R. 8790 aligned with recommendations released last year from the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission, which was co-chaired by the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. H.R. 8790, however, also contains a number of provisions that would undermine basic protections for communities, lands, waters, and wildlife, reduce opportunities for public input, and heighten the likelihood for conflict, litigation, and delay unneeded forest restoration and resilience work. The administration, therefore, strongly opposes the bill. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Also point out they did not threaten to veto the bill. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you bringing this bill forward, because I'll tell you, it's very timely for me, because we were just out in Boise at the National Interagency Fire Center, and looking at those guys, and they, the smoke jumpers, incredible, but we'd love to put them out of business. So that they weren't having to deal with these forest fires. And, I think every group was out at the time we were out there. But I also, Mr. Westerman, I wanted to just maybe ask you a little bit about your qualifications in bringing this bill forward. And, I think you speak as an expert. Can I call you an expert on this? And maybe you can mention.
Well, maybe an expert for Congress, but I do have a forestry degree, and I've worked on forest policy for about 10 years now, and I'll tell you, this is the best bill we've had to put forth that could do more good for our nation's hundreds of millions of acres of forest than anything we've done before. And like I said, it is a large bipartisan effort to get to this point, and it incorporates new technologies. We're doing something called fire sheds in here, and if you think of we've all heard of watersheds, where it has to do with topography, and when water falls on an area, we know all that water is going to flow down into a stream. Well, fire has similar characteristics, where the geography and the forest type and prevailing winds, you can kind of predict how fire is going to move when it gets on the landscape. So we're taking this fire shed approach using modern technology, doing interagency cooperation. We're really trying to incorporate tribal forest management in working closely with states and local communities, because fire knows no boundaries. And we need to figure out, use AI and mapping and remote sensing so that we can get the best idea of how these fires are going to operate, whether that's on 4 different jurisdictions or one jurisdiction, and get all that cooperation and working together. And that's really one of the focus areas of the bill.
And I appreciate that you pointed out, you worked bipartisanly on this, and Mr. Peters still supports the bill. And I was wondering if you cared to comment on some of the things that the ranking member mentioned from the administration's letter, all of those horrible things were going to happen where, when I'm hearing you describe it, it's actually much different than what they are thinking.
When, as the chairman said, it wasn't a threat to veto, it was pretty negative language, but I would say, I would ask them, what's working right now? What are you doing right now that's working? And they don't have a very good track record to show. They're $12 billion, I believe, has been put into the Forest Service under this administration, and they're treating less acres every year. So it's certainly not a funding problem. It's a policy problem, and it's the way that they're attacking the problem instead of needing more money or needing more people. They need a different way to work, and that's what we're trying to give them authority to do.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing this bill forward because we need to get back to forest management and making healthy forests instead of just having to fight the fires, because we can prevent them.
As we would say, the proof's in the pudding. We've seen this over and over now. And I mentioned a couple of these fires where they were raging infernos, and the fire got to an area that had been managed, and it dropped down out of the crowns, got on the ground where firefighters can fight it, and that's really what we're willing to replicate across the country.
Well, thank you very much, and with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized for questions.
Pass on questions.
Gentlelady has no questions. The gentleman from South Carolina.
Like you say, it's more policy than anything else. What's it gonna take for the American people to, and I just saw the numbers, you know, it used to be pre-settlement, European settlement, 64 trees per acre, now it's 300. I'm in the forestry, we mine timber, we plant timber. The recipe for a forest fire is thatch that's that high and trees that are so that you can't walk. When is common sense going to, particularly like in California, that's wanting federal aid to ban them every time there's a forest fire? Environmentalists, you can't, trees in their minds live forever. You can't cut one. That's why the thinning doesn't take place. When does that, what's it going to take to change that?
It's really a travesty, and I hope people will start to look at the facts and the data and trust what forest management science tells us. And it starts with the fact that a tree is God's way of sequestering carbon. It's been doing it since trees have been carrying on photosynthesis. It pulls carbon dioxide out of the air, releases oxygen, and stores the carbon in the tree, and it stores it there until that tree is burned or it's eaten by bugs, which it comes out as respiration or carbon dioxide when it's burned. But if we manage the forest and keep it healthy, these trees last a long, long time. And we know that when we harvest trees and put it into wood products, this table at one time was a tree or multiple trees, and the carbon that it sequestered is still in this table. And you're exactly right. The landscape is way overpopulated with the number of trees per acre. They start competing for sunlight. They compete for water and nutrients. They get weak. You often get insects and disease that come in that kill the trees. So now you got dead standing timber and dead timber in the duff on the forest floor. And fire can happen by, human cause, or it can happen by lightning, but eventually fire is going to happen, and all of that dead timber is going to burn, and it's going to kill a lot of the live trees when it does it. So there's a way to work with nature and manage so that we keep healthy, vibrant forest all across the landscape. Now, when you get a healthy forest, you naturally get clean air. Forests do so much to clean the water as well because of the roots holding the soil in place, and provides wildlife habitat, provides places for us to recreate. there's no downside to having a healthy forest. And it should be, if there's anything that should be bipartisan in Congress where we're all pulling in the same direction, saying, please do everything you can to make our forest healthy and resilient, we all should be working on that. And that's why I'm excited about the Fix Our Forest Act, because it truly is a bipartisan bill that will make a difference.
Well, I appreciate you putting this up, appreciate your testimony. It's common sense isn't so common with this. Fire lanes are hard to get. The saw timber that, the timber companies beg for, the ones that are operating now, a lot of them have shut down because of the supply chain issues. But anyway, hopefully this will bring some sanity, and I hope the American people will get involved and demand, particularly those who've had the houses burned up. They need to demand some
Representative Norman, you're talking about all those trees. When you get a lot of trees per acre, they're generally small trees, and you can't grow the big trees until you give them space to grow. And I think, the idealistic view of a healthy forest are big trees widely spaced, but if you never give them that space to grow, you're never going to get the big trees.
Not going to get it. That's 2x10s, 2x8s for construction. So, okay, thank you for your bill. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from New Mexico for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Westerman, for your work on this bill. I know you and I have had many conversations about it. You know, as well as I do, how quickly ranches, farms, small businesses can just literally be destroyed from wildfires. And it's happening everywhere. There is a community that's nestled by, in, and often living from the forest. So I agree that we need to do legislation to address this issue. I guess one of my, I want to give more thanks to you. I really do appreciate the work that you did in incorporating the language so that we could have better cooperation with tribes. The shared stewardship agreements are great. I like the biochar. I like the creation of a fireshed center. So there are many provisions I really like in this bill. I will raise one of the issues that I raised in committee, which is this bill doesn't have any funding authorization. And I know, and you know, that this kind of work takes resources. We need to increase the pay of our wildland firefighters. That takes resources. And when I say resources, it's money, right? We need to be able to pay our firefighters more. There are great innovative programs in here that we need to implement, but it costs money to implement. And there's no funding authorization whatsoever in the bill. And so that is a concern of mine. And, I would raise that with you here as I did in committee.
Thank you, Representative Ledger-Fernandez, and thank you for your input and work on the bill. You had a provision that I totally supported, and that was to react to the fires when they first start, because we saw what happened in New Mexico where the Forest Service started a fire and didn't get it put out, and it turned into another one of these raging infernos. I was supportive of that as well as with others, but the administration pushed back on that provision, so we ended up taking that out of the language. As far as the funding in the bill, there's a lot of positives in that area. And I'll say again what I said before, it's not a funding issue, it's a policy issue. I'm anticipating getting the CBO score, which is actually, my understanding is going to score the bill as cost savings. So by doing the management, you actually save money that can be used to do more management. And also, I believe we had an interior appropriations bill where we increased the funding for firefighting. So that's already out there as well. And I know that was opposed on the floor by a lot of folks, maybe not for that reason, but we have worked to get more funding for firefighters as well.
Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here with us today. As you've already spoken about today, the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill included billions of dollars for forest management projects to protect our forests from fires and other natural disasters. Chairman Westerman, it seems that despite the Biden-Harris administration's talk of supporting forest management, their actions tell a little bit of a different story. What could this administration do tomorrow to speed up the use of these resources for forest-saving projects? And who are they catering to by standing in the way of opposing measures like this one?
Well, I guess by tomorrow, they could put out a statement saying, we really support this bill. It will help us to get more management done because, they had a goal, I believe, of 6 million acres per year. Last year, I think they got 4.3 million acres managed, and this year it's going to be 4.2 million acres. So the numbers are going the wrong direction, even with the billions of dollars that were put or given to the agencies through the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. So the number one thing the administration could do would be get on board with sound forest management. And what we're really trying to do is untie their hands so they can actually do the work. You go to the individual forest and you get out in these forest units, and the people on the ground know what to do, and they want to do the right thing. There's a lot of great people that work for the Forest Service, but their hands are tied because they spend all of this time making a forest management plan, and then it gets tied up in court. So I think they're just as frustrated as we are as lawmakers when they see these forests burn and they know that it's their job to keep the forest healthy. And they're really making a concerted effort in most places to write management plans to go in and do the right thing. The problem is these plans never get carried out.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a tale as old as time, from energy to trade to forest management to agriculture. This Biden and Harris administration is beholden to radical environmental groups. These include the likes of the Earth Island Justice, which in 2022 held up meaningful forest management projects in Yosemite National Park. We cannot allow fanatics like these and their supporters in the administration to keep us from protecting our great national treasures such as Yosemite and others from avoidable disaster. I strongly support this legislation, and thank you very much, Chairman Westerman, and your committee's work in crafting this.
And Mr. Langworthy, you mentioned Yosemite. As part of working on this bill, we did a field hearing in Yosemite. And, it's heartbreaking to go out there. It was last fall, and it had been a few years since I'd been there, and it was unbelievable the amount of fire scars and the damage that's been done in one of our premier national parks because of no management, which in essence is management. It's bad management, and it'll take decades to recover from the damages that have already been done in iconic places like Yosemite. And we've killed 20% of the world's giant sequoias in a 2-year span out in Sequoia, or out in the Sierra Nevadas where the giant sequoias grow, because again, I'll say we've loved our trees to death. We said we're not going to do any management, and we're going to put the fires out when they stop. That was decisions that were made over 100 years ago, and the undergrowth just grew up in the sequoia groves and created the ladder fuels to get fire up in the crowns and killed trees that we didn't think previously could really be killed by wildfire.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony here today. I have no further questions. Thank you for appearing before us today, and Chairman Westerman, you're excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to welcome up our second panel, Chairman McCall, Representative Crow, Representative Self, and Representative Amo from the Committee on Foreign Affairs to the witness table. Okay. Well, thank you very much